I do what I do.
Had to flee Germany because he was not only an intellectual, but he was also a bluish person. All right. And in the context of Yahtzee ideology and policies, liberalism defined broadly as a support for democratic governance and civil liberties. Okay. And individual freedoms and all that stuff was incompatible with the Yahtzee regime and authoritarianism and totalitarianism. All right. You're going to do what I say when I say do it. Now, here's the other thing you got to understand. And I want to talk to my black people specifically. The reason that they target the bluish people, right, is rooted in the combination of racism and ideology and conspiracy theories and this long-lasting anti-bluish precedent. The Nazi regime officially justified their actions with a lot of false and harmful reasoning, but the bottom line is we got to look past that and understand that white folk, the Yahtzees, saw these people as they call them. First of all, they weren't considered white. Okay. In fact, I've talked about this on numerous occasions on this particular channel, where I explained that white people that we consider white now weren't always white. The Irish weren't white. The Polish weren't white. The Jewish people were not white. And, the Italians definitely were not white. They were considered inferior races, and they were incompatible with the so-called racial purity of this Aryan master race. You understand me? That's where they were at with it. They wanted to keep this social purity popping off. Okay. And they argued that in order, under the false pretense that the bluish people were responsible for the moral decay and capitalism and communism and all that, they began to do horrible things to them. Okay. Again, the real reason, the true motivation behind the Yahtzee party targeting the bluish people was racial hatred and ideological fantasyism, if we'll say. It's no different than the same reason they targeting these brown and black immigrants that they're running up out of the United States right now. I'm telling the truth. You know, I'm telling the truth, because I don't see them rounding up these Canadians and shipping them back to Canada or sending them to Uganda or El Salvador. It's the truth. You understand me, family? We're going to deal with the truth, or we're not going to deal at all. But that's what's going on. Now, here's the thing. Understanding this Yahtzee conception of race, okay, it's basically, shout out to Canary Violence, it's basically pseudoscience, it's beliefs that often it doesn't align with science, but there's a racial hierarchy. And they put the Aryan or Nordic race at the top, which they associate with qualities of strength and purity and superiority, even though we all know that ain't really happening. That's the crux, that's the pinnacle, that's the cornerstone of this white supremacy brainwashing. Nevertheless, they classify Jewish people as a racial group, not as a religious group or a cultural community. Okay, and they thought the bluish people as less than. You see, that's where they're coming from. And why is that? Well, it's based on historical. It's based on the fact that they clearly are an ethnic group. They see them as different. We see them as white, but that's a broad category. That's like us classifying all black people as black. But when we look at a sub-Saharan African, we can clearly see the difference between them and most Black Americans. We're different people, but they also saw them as a racial threat because of the potential chance for interbreeding. You understand what I'm saying? And here's the thing. I want to talk to you all about somebody so we can have a better understanding. Who knows who Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is? Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, our mother, sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has moved on. And but she was a brilliant doctor. She was a psychiatrist. She was an author. She was a theorist. Let me see if I can get a photograph of her so I can kind of put her up here so we can kind of put it in context. She had this debate back in the 70s when she was a young woman, and she really just blew this this racist know nothing all out the water. Let me see if I can pull this photograph up so you can see our sister. She passed on some years back. This is our sister right here, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Rest in power. Rest in power, queen. Okay. Nevertheless, she was known for this particular theory regarding white people and racial dynamics, and her work primarily centered on the concept of racial issues, and they're rooted in these deep-seated psychological and biological cultural factors. So Dr. Welsing, she was most, and some of you probably read this book, she was most known for the ISIS papers, okay? And if you haven't read the book, it's the ISIS papers, The Keys to Colors, the 1991 edition. I actually have that, where she explores her theories about race and genetics and power. Something that I didn't know until I began listening to her, which seems obvious, but white people are a genetic minority on the planet. And Dr. Welsing argued that white people are, because of their racial minority status in the global context, they originated from a small group of Europeans who migrated out of the larger population of dark and black people, brown people, and they got lost and isolated. They left in small numbers, and because of their environment, because of their habitat, they developed psychological and behavioral adaptations to maintain power and control. Okay, they were people that were stuck in an environment that was hostile, and so they had to adapt culturally and physically to deal with that. So some of the things that these behaviors that white people from Northern Europe had to deal with caused for them to be who they are. She actually theorized that white people's behaviors and attitudes, such as racism and violence and the need to dominate, are driven by deep-seated fear of extinction or being overwhelmed by populations. According to her, this fear is rooted in their genetic origins and their desire to survive. You understand? And that leads to this racist actions, of what we perceive to be racist actions to maintain dominance. Now, I want you all to understand something real quick. Okay, let's talk about it. If you were in a room with 93 people and you were 7 deep, you and your family members, and all of these people surrounded you, some may wish you harm, some didn't, but your job is to survive, right? What would you do to survive, right? I'm just pointing it out. What would you do to survive? What sort of pressure would you be under if you were a tiny group of people isolated and stuck in a small room with limited resources? You do everything you possibly could to survive. And that is the source of white supremacy racism, based on what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has taught us in her many years. So I'm trying to help y'all understand. You see, one of the keys of understanding is being able to put yourself in the mind of folks so you can really get it. Nevertheless, her theory posits that this systematic racism and white supremacy are driven by these underlying fears of basically being overwhelmed and being bred out of existence. And so she saw racism as a manifestation of collective fear, leading to these oppressive behaviors aimed at maintaining racial dominance so they can survive. Here's the thing. Dr. Cress Welsing's theory about white folk revolves around the idea that they're genetically and psychologically distinct, okay? And their behaviors are driven by fears of genetic dilution. And her work links this fear to systematic racism and white supremacy. They're one in one. That fear gives rise to what these behaviors are. You see, and that's why even though white folks are doing great in America, and they're actually doing great all the way around the world, they own every damn thing, okay? They still feel as though they're losing, okay? And their fear, this fear manifests as a desire to maintain racial purity and it leads to systematic oppression and violence and exclusion of groups perceived as threats to racial integrity, specifically Black people. Because when you really look at it, and she used to use pool balls, the darker you are, the more of a threat you are. You see, if you light, if you white, you're all right. If you yellow, you're mellow. Black father, I have black son.
Tune in, weekly feeling inspired. From the heart, real talk ignite. Every episode brings the light. Subscribe, hit the like, won't you dare. Share the love, you know it's family. Join us every week, don't be late. Drop some coins in the collection plate. Drop some coins, enjoy the ride. Come say hi, catch the wave, don't pass by. Lifted spirits always in sight. In this podcast, joy takes flight. Subscribe, hit the like, won't you dare. Share the love, you know it's fair. Join us every week, don't be late. Drop some coins in the collection plate. Drop some coins.
Donation. I thought it was a trash.
Hey man, I do what I do. You know that.
Your ass class, don't come over here. Now what? You tall black mother. Women up inside. I don't give a fuck about